Hi, Michael. Thanks so much for joining. Just waiting for just a few more folks to come on, and hopefully the video will buffer here a bit. Tonight, we're going to be talking about emergency funds. So if you have any questions about emergency funds, feel free to submit them now. I know the last time that we talked about emergency funds, I tried to squeeze it all into one episode of talking about emergency funds, retirement, and all these crazy things you need to save for. And people had tons of questions I wasn't able to address. So if you've got questions via Facebook or Instagram, throw them at me now. I'd absolutely love to hear them. All right, hopefully everything has buffered and we'll get started here. My name is Grace Pomeroy. I'm a financial educator, speaker, and coach, and I help people make money their friend in life, work, and love. Currently, I'm obsessed with helping couples have open and honest conversations about money and tackle the big financial issues together so they don't get in the way of their awesome relationship. So tonight's topic is emergency funds, and it is certainly a tricky one. I have to say, if I did not have the encouragement of my financial coach years and years ago, I'm not sure if I would have even saved one. Because to be honest, saving up for a traditional emergency fund, that 3 to 6 months of expenses, can sound like such a daunting task that I didn't even really want to take it on. But I'm grateful that when I was in graduate school, my financial coach said, Grace, you need to start saving $25 a month. Put that money away so you have a little bit of cushion for the unexpected that might come your way. So if you haven't started saving for an emergency, this is a good time to start. Today is a good day to get started, and you are not too late. For those of you who are wondering, do I have enough? Am I keeping it in the right place? What even counts as an emergency? Don't worry, you're also in the right place today. We'll talk about all of those details in the next few minutes. So the lead-in for today is really coming from my personal experience. If you read my blog post for this week, and I hope you'll check it out, it's about my husband's accident. It's been 1 year since Tyler was in this car accident. The anniversary was technically on Sunday. And when I think back to that day of sitting next to my husband's hospital bed, just trying to be as helpful as I could, the one thing that gave me such a sense of confidence was knowing that we were prepared financially for whatever might come our way. Now, certainly you can't be prepared for every eventuality, but I knew that we had money in the bank that we could spend. I knew that we had money in savings to protect us and hedge us against any of those extra expenses. We had money in our HSA. We were stocked, at least for the short term, and that made me feel so much better because I could focus on him and not on our finances. So let's jump in by talking about emergencies. I think often where people get tripped up when it comes to emergency funds is they wonder, what is the goal? What am I actually trying to save up for here? And what is defined as an emergency? Now, I'll be truthful with you. I have saved up for emergencies now for 7 years, and I have certainly used my emergency fund for non-emergency items. Definitely not something I would suggest. So I think if you're just beginning to create an emergency fund, or even if you already have one in place, it's important to have a conversation with your partner, or if you're single, to really think for yourself, what counts as an emergency when you're not in an emergency situation, so you know when you can pull the money from there. Here are some common emergencies that I tend to think about. A fender bender and needing to pay your deductible for your car insurance. An unexpected medical expense, like my husband getting hospitalized after his accident. Maybe you have to go home for an unexpected funeral. Maybe you have to replace an appliance. All of those things I think are included under the guise of emergency. Some things that I don't think should be included are moving and needing to pay for a moving truck. For instance, going on a late-breaking vacation because it sounds like a lot of fun. Going on a shopping spree because the thing you wanted was on sale and you just couldn't help yourself. Create the rules for yourself now so you can protect your future self, or to protect your future self from making those decisions that you may look back on without much pride. So frame up for yourself what an emergency looks like. And as you're thinking about how much money you need in your account, think about those emergencies you've experienced in the past, 2 to 5 years. Think about that. What emergencies have come into your life, those unexpected expenses, and how much did they cost? Write them down so you get a sense of how much you've used over the past few years. Whether you pulled from savings or you pulled from checking or you put that on a credit card, just get to know what you've already used for those emergency expenses. So what's the goal? What number are we actually aiming for here? In the short term, the goal should be to have at least $1,000 in savings. Now, I don't care if you're trying to pay off debt. I don't care. You've got to have this emergency fund in place. The only thing more important than that is creating a realistic budget to make sure all those bills are paid on time. If you're not paying your bills on time, you're behind, you've got some creditors that are following you, that's a whole nother scenario. But if you have a sustainable budget, this is a good time to get that emergency fund in place. And saving that first $500 to $1,000, depending if you're single or if you're married, and depending on your life situation, is crucial. That $1,000 can act as a buffer against those emergencies when they come your way. Now, after that point, that's when we start working towards the larger goal of 3 to 6 months of expenses. Now, notice I didn't say income there, I said expenses. So instead of thinking about it like 3 to 6 months of your paycheck, while that would certainly be ideal, consider instead what expenses you wouldn't be able to cut down in the case of an emergency. So let's say, for instance, I know it's not a fun thing to think about, but you lost your job. If you lost your job, what would you do? What expenses would you be able to cut off right away, and what things would you still be required to pay? For instance, you could get rid of your Netflix subscription, you could eat out less, but you'd still need to make your mortgage or your rent payment. You'd likely still need to make your student loan payments, although you may be able to get that payment to go down if you're not making any income. Go through each expense line by line so you know what you'd have to pay in the case of an emergency, and then multiply that number by 3 for the minimum, and then 6 for that kind of maximum, that top buffer in terms of how much you want in that emergency fund. That gives you a sense of what you're aiming for long term. Now again, you want to make sure you have that $1,000 saved up before you even begin thinking about this larger goal. And while you're saving up that $1,000, I'm guessing you'll begin to find ways to cut and trim your budget so you have money to put towards it. Continue putting that money towards your larger goal as well. For instance, like I mentioned earlier, I started with just $25 a month going towards my emergency fund, and now that I'm making a full-time salary, I'm out of graduate school, I've grown that amount to up to about 5% of my husband and I's budget goes towards our emergency fund savings. Now, when we reach that emergency fund goal, we can then divert that money towards something else. But to be honest, that's a 5% we don't even miss, and we're really glad that it's going towards creating this buffer for us. I'm going to stop here and see if anybody has any questions. I'd love to know if you've got questions about emergency funds. If you're watching this recording later, please submit your questions via chat. I'd absolutely love to respond to those. So how do you build that emergency fund? How do you find that extra cash? The first thing that you should consider is building up that $1,000, $500 to $1,000, again, depending on your life situation, as quickly as you can. If you've got other goals you're saving for and you don't have that pocket of money saved, I encourage you to divert your attention towards that emergency fund just until you get that $1,000. If you got a tax refund this year, or maybe like me, you're still waiting for that tax refund to come, maybe that's something you consider putting it towards. Maybe you put some money from your birthday, money from Christmas. Maybe you earn some extra money in a side hustle to put it towards that. Put that $1,000 together as quickly as you can. Now, for that longer term emergency fund, that 3 to 6 months of savings, that's where I think you can begin to hold back and go a little bit slower. I like to think about this emergency fund like getting your retirement account in place. You're probably not going to save all of the money you need for retirement right away. You're going to do it little by little every month. So decide on a value that sounds good to you, maybe $50, maybe $100, $200, and begin to put that into your account on a regular basis and see how it adds up. I encourage you, if you can save up to 5% and put towards that emergency fund, that's great. We've got a lot of other savings goals we're putting in there as well. I see that Gwen Friard has joined us. Hi, Gwen. Thanks so much. If you got any questions, feel free to jump in and add on. So again, fast for that first 1,000, and you can move a little bit more incrementally on that 3 to 6 months. Now, the one reason probably why you're going to move incrementally is because I know many of you have a lot of other savings goals you want to save for, and saving up for that 3 to 6 months emergency fund is just one thing on the plate, but I do still encourage you to make it a priority. The next piece of the puzzle is, of course, where do you keep these funds? You've created these emergency funds, you've got that $1,000, you're building up to that 3 to 6 months of expenses. What are you going to do from there? If you want to make sure that that $1,000 is nearby because you know you might need it sometime for that car deductible, that broken appliance, whatever it might have to be, keep it in your bank account, maybe in a separate savings account, or maybe even open a separate checking account at your bank where you can keep that money handy. If you're concerned that you're going to begin to take money from that fund that doesn't quite qualify as an emergency that we talked about earlier, I encourage you then to put some rules and regulations around it. You can even enlist your bank in helping you with this. This is something that we did while we were saving up our emergency fund money. I called my bank and I asked them, is there a way for you to lock this account? And it turns out there was. I asked them to put a lock on it. What that means is I can put a lot of money into it, but I can't even, when I'm looking at the online portal, see how much money is in there. It's blind. And if I want to take money out of that account, I can't just do an automatic secret transfer, through my online portal. I have to either give them a call or go in person. And it's been great to have that barrier because it's like money that's just sitting in my account. It's something that I can't access. It's almost as if it doesn't belong to me. But I do know that if something were to happen and I needed to access that money quickly, I could still do that. So again, place some protections on yourself if you're getting worried about it. Now for that 3 to 6 months of expenses, likely, let's hope, you're not going to have to tap into that money very soon. So what I do encourage you to do is make sure you're earning interest on that money, which is going to help you to reach that 3 to 6 months of expenses goal even faster. One of the best ways to do that is to put it in a high interest or high yield savings account. These savings accounts have a lot higher interest rate than bank accounts. I know the one we are currently using has an over 2% interest rate, whereas at our bank we are earning not even pennies on the dollar for our interest rate. I mean, we're earning very, 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 very little on interest. So putting it in this high interest or high yield savings account has really allowed our money to grow quickly. I also love that when I log into my bank account, I don't see it because we actually chose an online bank, a completely different bank than what we're using for our regular checking and savings, to be our high yield savings account. So it's not something we look at all the time. It's kind of a set it and forget it, similar to the way you might invest in an IRA or your 401k. Now, if you're curious where you might find some of these high yield or high interest savings accounts, one of the best ways to do that is to do a little online research. I personally love the website NerdWallet, NerdWallet, NerdWallet. They have great resources and they review on an annual basis who's got the best high yield savings accounts, and you can see the pros and cons of each. You may even see some that you have relationships with. For instance, this is not at all a promotion, but we ended up going through American Express in order to do our savings, which is nice because I already had a credit card through them, so we already had that relationship. All right, does anybody have any questions around emergency funds or getting these funds in place, where you should keep them? Any questions? All right, well, then I'm going to keep moving on. Something to note about those high yield and high interest savings accounts is they can have a minimum requirement in terms of the amount of money you're going to need to have in there. So it's possible that you may need to save some in your bank account beyond that $1,000 before you can begin putting it into that high interest savings account. The other thing I encourage you to watch out for is fees. Personally, we picked an account that didn't have any fees associated with it, but I know that there are many out there that do. So just make sure you do your research. All right, that's all I've got for you guys in terms of emergency funds, but I did want to end today with a quick sneak peek into something I'm so excited about. In 2 weeks, I am going to be releasing my new brand, which is honestly not that dissimilar to what you've seen from me today, but has enough nuances that I wanted to re-release. I cannot be more passionate about this. I started blogging again about a year and a couple months ago, because I had this passion inside of me to talk about money again and to continue my blog that I had started so long ago. And it's been so much fun to get back into it. But I have to tell you, when I started doing this again, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to pursue. In fact, I just wanted to help anyone and everyone when it came to money. And isn't that a really great mission that speaks to everyone while probably speaking to no one all at the same time, to be honest. So I've decided to make a pivot in my business and focus on the area that I am most passionate about, which is helping couples have open and honest conversations about money, talking about things just like this, emergency funds, and helping them see the way that their money can enliven and enrich their intimacy while also giving them firm footing to reach their greatest goals. So if you're interested in hearing more about this, keep an eye out on Instagram, on Facebook, on my blog, and on my website, because there's going to be some changes coming soon and some great new content. Thank you guys so much for joining. Again, if you've got any questions, feel free to submit them. Be happy to answer. Have a great night.